up in Grassy Head, just near Stewart's Point. Well, it's pretty much, we all call Stewart's Point, Grassy Head, all one area. My grandfather is a Bundjalung man, Lismore, and my grandmother was a Gumbaynggirr woman from this area. We grew up with stories of Yowies, but not only just Yowies. We grew up with stories of little small hairy men, which we call brown jacks. I don't know whether you guys have heard of...
yeah, we heard of the brown jacks. You have stories of the bigger ones as well.
Yeah, so the story was about the bigger ones. My grandfather was a very cultural man. The area where we grew up at Grassy Head was a really spiritual area. The whole of Stewart's Point is really spiritual. We grew up in an old banana shed, just a couple of bedrooms, pretty much just a battery-operated light, and, he was living off the land type of lifestyle. He would speak in his native tongue as well, and he would sit us out and tell us stories about brown jacks and yowies, and when he was a child, he got really, really sick, and his uncle was a clever man. He sucked all the illness out of my grandfather, and, then he gave him his spiritual guide, which was a little brown jack. And so he would sit us out of a night time and speak in his native tongue to call out to his little brown jack, and he would sit there and talk to him while we were sitting. We couldn't see him, but he would tell us that he was there, and, he'd talk to him, and we could hear these noises, around. And so there was a lot of belief in, what he was saying, because he was a very serious man, Today he'd be close to 100 years old, so he's got a lot of history and knowledge and stuff that's been passed down to him. And so these stories, they were always embedded in our culture and our family. And when I was about 17 years old, we were allowed to go to certain areas at Stewart's Point, Grassy Head, but there was, of a night time, we weren't allowed to go to these areas. Like, we even had to be in at a certain time, even if it was just out the front of our house, we had to be in, because it was warnings that, they were around, and, you shouldn't be out there. And as kids, sometimes we're like, it's just him just trying to scare us a little bit. About 17, and we were heading down to a party at Grassy Head. He'd also tell us about how they would travel from Yowiehunters Mountain down through the creek, down to the beach.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt this fantastic story, but the reason I was up there was because a couple of white guys from Kempsey said we were hunting down the creek. I think it basically runs from Yarrapinny down to Stewart's Head, right? And they found these really big footprints that were really deep in the mud, and they went, hey, this is really weird, because our footprints only go a little bit. It's very weird, and it's got 6 toes, whatever it is, and it's big and heavy. Interesting. But sorry, keep going on the story, because that's the same creek.
Yeah, so this creek runs out onto Grassy Head Beach. So we went down to go to a party, and we knew that the party was over at south side of Grassy, but just for instance, I don't know why, but we went over to north side of Grassy, and it was a full moon. There was 4 of us. There was my cousin and my brother, and also a white guy that he would never have believed in any of that sort of stuff. We started to walk up sort of north side of Grassy, heading up towards Middlehead, to where this creek is, and we could see what we thought were a group of people up the beach. And we thought, okay, well, maybe the party's over here. And we started walking. We got up about, 10 metres up the beach, and I don't know, something was just telling me, my instincts were just saying, hang on a minute, if it was a bunch of teenagers, they wouldn't be really quiet, and there'd be a fire going, and they'd be running around being a bit crazy. But there was none of that. There was just sort of like this still night, a full moon, where we could see totally up the beach, and there was about five of what we thought were just, humans. So we got up the beach, kept walking, and I was saying to myself, things from a distance should be small. I was sort of questioning, where they were, and coming out, they were right at the creek area, and I was thinking, there's something strange about these people. things are supposed to be smaller from a distance. And when you go from the north, the track at Grassy Head going up to Middle Head, it's a bit of a distance. And then it got to a point where we all sort of like just stopped and were just sort of staring, and we were quiet, and then we started questioning, what was going on and who they were and all this sort of scenario, trying to sort of figure out what was going on. And then, we just kept going. We just thought, okay, well, we'll just keep going and see who it is. And then, but just something just kept telling me, like, hang on a minute, this is not right. Something's going on. And even the other guys were starting to question, the whole, what were they or what is it sort of thing. And so we got about 100 metres up the beach, and then all of a sudden we all just stopped. And these things were sort of like in a circle type thing. So they went from a circle to all standing in a line which looked like they were facing towards us. And so it was like this sort of standoff of, okay, they've noticed us, we've noticed them. And within a split second, it was like, oh my God, these are Yowies, like this is freaky. It just went from a split second to these things just started charging towards us. And I to this day, I get a little bit shaky about the whole story, because it was the craziest thing I've ever experienced. And even the people that were with me were really shaken up. They started running towards us, and before I could even say run, I looked around, and the white guy that was with us, and he was a bit older, he had already ran. He was gone. He was out of there. He's just nowhere to be seen. And then we all just started running and got back to the main caravan park, and we were just like, oh my God, was that really what we just seen? Like it was just... And he was like, I never believe in... The white guy was like, I'd never believe in any of that sort of stuff. And he goes, and now I'm a believer, because that was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. And this guy's, he grew up in the area, and typical white guy, never believed in that sort of stuff, and yeah, it just totally changed his whole outlook. But sort of clarified the whole stories of how my grandfather would tell us that, they would come down from Yowiehunters at a certain time of the year, have some sort of ritual ceremony type thing at Grassy Head. That story of him telling us that story was pretty much what we had experienced. For a lot of years, you don't talk about it. I sit around and tell my kids the story now when we go camping and stuff, and I'm a total believer. I always have been.
But you were 17, right?
I was 17, yeah.
And how old are you now?
I'm 38 now, so...
As you came up on these things, your first reaction was they were people, right? Or perhaps they were people. What made you make the jump from people to Yowies?
Well, people of all different sizes, all different shapes, and they definitely weren't teenagers. They were all pretty much the same shape. There was no sort of like neck type thing. It was just really solid, thick, and they were all pretty much the same. There wasn't any variety of shape between them. There was nothing else that I thought they could have been. Well,
in terms of size,
yeah.
Were they the same size as you, or bigger, or?
Oh no, they were bigger. Like I said, from a distance, things should be smaller, and these things just weren't small at all. They were big from when we first saw them to when we started getting closer.
What time of the night was this?
Would have been around about 11:30 at night.
Can you be specific about the location where they were standing? I mean, like, are you saying it was near the mouth of the creek?
Yeah, they were right at the mouth of the creek. There's a mansion right next to the creek on the northern side of the creek, right next door to the creek, and there's a little bridge area. So it's like in between the Yarra retreat, like a 7-day Adventist place.
From what you've been told, your family didn't use the term Yowie. I mean, well, they used the term brown jacks for the little ones. Did they have a name for the bigger ones?
No, Yowie. It was a Yowie. Yeah.
Okay, interesting, because that's like almost like a European name for a, you know.
Yeah.
But they were pretty sure that Yowies are these things.
Yeah. What we were told as children that they were pretty much guardians of the forest. They weren't anything different from us, except that they were the guardians of the forest, the mountains, and they weren't primates or anything like that. They were like humans, but they were protectors.
And the view was that these things, they lived on Mount Yarrapini or around, or?
Well, they're all around. So the Yarrahapini, Middlehead, Scott's Head. Lots of our family have had sightings. My brother's had his own sighting, another sighting of his with our uncle.
Where was that? Can you tell me a little bit about that one?
That was at Scott's Head. At Scott's Head turn-off to Grassy Head. We used to, when we were walking up from Stewart's Point to Grassy, we'd always hear, grandfather would always tell us, don't pay attention, because as soon as you pay attention, it starts to encourage them. But we used to actually have a name for our brown jack. His name was Midingi. We get followed walking up Grassy Head. He'd say, if you pay attention to them and know that they're there, then they will continuously torment you and follow you. But if you just sort of keep your distance and keep walking, it'll be fine.
Were they seen as good or bad, or neither, or just protectors?
Well, they weren't seen as bad or good. They were just there. And I think just having that encounter, you're a little bit scared of the unknown, so you're young, and so running was like the best option. I don't think we wanted to stand around and have a conversation.
Did your grandfather ever talk about the differences between the big ones and the little ones? How they were connected? I mean, the little ones were the protectors. What were the big ones?
Well, they were also protectors. They were protectors of the same. The little ones had a spiritual significance with the Indigenous peoples, where they could communicate with the brown jacks. Hence why he was given his little spirit brown jack.
In a lot of the material written about the little hairy ones, often by people that aren't Indigenous, it sort of says these were tales to scare children from going out at night and misbehaving and things. But this seems like it's a lot more than that.
No, it's a lot more than that, totally. As a little kid, you think of, you grow up very, in a cultural lifestyle and hearing about these stories, and you believe what your culture is. And, these stories go back quite a long time, through the generations. And my grandfather wasn't one to spin a yarn, when we'd go to bed, so we'd all sleep. I'm one of 7 children, so we'd all sleep in the one room, and he would come in at the night time and pretty much count us. And, I remember saying one night, why are you counting us? And he goes, I'm just making sure there's not an extra one in the bed.